quite a remarkable morning so far. No one was taking talkback calls before 9 o'clock in the morning before the platform started. And what did we have? 6, 7, 8 calls in 10 minutes after the opening stanza of the show, where I discussed, well, I think the quite significant events at Tūranga Waiwai Marae yesterday at the Karanihana celebrations, which involved the government or the senior partner of the coalition government taking a new, I think, modified and clearer position on ACT's Treaty Principles Bill. And that was that Tama Pautaka, the Minister of Māori Affairs, said on behalf of the Prime Minister, who confirmed it on social media, that National has moved its position from supporting the ACT's Treaty Principles Bill just to first reading. The position is now that it will not support it after first reading. Shane Jones, the Deputy Leader of the New Zealand First Party, also said on the Marae yesterday that that was New Zealand First position. And unfortunately, his leader, Winston Peters, had to leave the event because of another commitment before he could speak. And now, I know Mr. Peters, who joins us now by video link, that we're going to talk to you about the TAB. I first want to ask you, is it okay, given the events of the last few hours, that we move on and talk about this?
Most certainly. I was surprised you want to talk about the TAB, actually.
All right.
This is much more interesting.
Okay, well, we got you here. All right. What is the position now of New Zealand First as regards the Treaty Principles Bill? Is it in lockstep with the National Party's position?
Look, yesterday we went to celebrate the Maori King's 18 years in that position, having inherited the role from his mother. Now, what was astonishing yesterday was all the posturing and posing and bull dust, frankly. And I've been there for almost 50 years on these events, and I couldn't believe what I was watching, so to speak, because in the coalition agreement, it's clear as daylight. It was an agreement that we conferred on when the National and LACT had that agreement, because we had said at the time we're not supporting that thing. And they said, but we wanted to go to a first reading. So that was the compromise, and not beyond that. And it's in the coalition agreement, has been since the coalition was formed. And here you got people yesterday like Tuku Morgan jumping up and down and bull dusting their audience is absolute nonsense, because it's all in the coalition agreement. And as Shane Jones subtly said, why don't you read this New Testament called the coalition agreement? It's all there. Stop posing.
All right. But the fact may be, Mr. Peters. Yeah, okay.
You want to know why?
Why?
Well, you know why? Because there are no principles in the Treaty of Waitangi. People like Pumari, Buck, these famous people who have been around a long time, Ngata, who got a law degree in 2 years, and before him, the famous Deputy Prime Minister and Acting Prime Minister Carroll, well over a century ago, far closer to the event. None of them said there were principles in the Treaty of Waitangi, this 3-clause document. And in the land case of 1987, go back and look at it. You got these 5 judges wrestling over it. None of them could agree either. So let's stop having this academic bull dust and get back to telling New Zealanders what the truth of the matter is. And that's New Zealand's first position. We made it very clear to Mr. Seymour. Mr. Seymour, we cannot support your bill because you're going down a pathway that is fictional. There are no principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. It's a 3-clause document between two peoples.
I think, well, okay. Could I proffer another interpretation that I think resonates with many who listen to the platform and maybe many New Zealanders? If there are no principles to the Treaty of Waitangi, how can we have courts and official organisations, statutory organisations like the Waitangi Tribunal, spending our money to tell us that certain things that governments do are in breach of the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi? Don't we need a law that says there are no principles to the Treaty of Waitangi?
Well, hang on. I go back to 1987 when the court made that decision that alluded to it's something like a partnership. And one person in New Zealand politics at the moment, no lawyer, and no judge, but one person in New Zealand politics, namely yours truly, said, excuse me, how can, if this is the truth, if no one in the British Empire or in the UK was in partnership with Queen Victoria on the 5th of February 1840, how could the Maori be on the 7th, 2 days later?
So, Mr. Peters, given that, why can we not have legislation that makes the absence of treaty principles clear? Because you will have seen, and you know, you often rail against it, principles, these ethereal, non-existent principles, are being used to spend government money, drive government policy, and some would say discriminate on the grounds of race in New Zealand. So why can't we make it clear there are no principles?
Because these people have been doing it for years in academia, in the sociology department at universities. They've been preaching this absolute nonsense unchallenged, and with accepting of very few politicians. And before the 2023 election, the only one politician ever challenged any of these things was a party called New Zealand First.
Yes, but you're not challenging it now, Mr. Peters. You're saying let's just not deal with it.
No, but here's my point. We're making it very clear. And we're saying you're not going to go on having these references to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi in legislation. That's in our coalition agreement. We want it all gone. We want this nonsense because what it's doing is actually it's sidelining real Maori issues and real societal issues for these elitists at the top who bleed off their people in terms of their incomes and their lifestyle and never, ever pass the money down to the
Okay, I think I get a perception now, and I'm trying to encapsulate it for our audience. You're saying we don't need to have a debate about the treaties of the principles of the treaty because they don't exist. Let's go just straight to getting rid of reference to the treaties of principle in our laws, in our policies, in the administration of this country.
Precisely. Look, I've been to universities and challenged Maori academics. I've said to them, come on, you get up and tell me what the principles are. And you can't, can you? You've got hospitals interpreting the principles. You've got all sorts of institutions, government departments interpreting the principles. They're all different. It's a multifactual myth that's going on, the multi-layered myth that's going on.
Geez,
and it makes us look like a nonsense.
I'm amazed, actually, to be honest, that ACT hasn't adopted your position, because it would seem to cut to the chase somewhat.
Well, I made it very clear. When they came up with this idea, I thought, I don't believe what I'm seeing here. The very thing they're seeking to destroy on the very basis of the historical truth of it, they're saying exists. It's called, we're going to have a bill about the principles of Treaty of Waitangi because we're not certain what the principles are.
Do you think that the Prime Minister... Do you think that the Prime Minister and Tama Potaka think there are principles of the Treaty of Waitangi?
You'd have to ask them. But I go back to a document, to a paper...
Well, I'd find it hard given... Yeah, sorry.
I go back to a thesis written 202 years ago by a Maori who got a law degree in what is a record for any student in 2 years flat called ngata. I think the man's a genius. He's not from my tribe, he's from Ngāti Porou, but he's a genius. He's right, and these other pretenders are absolutely wrong.